Are the right people doing the, when it happens, how are you going to resolve it? Okay. And then when you look at some of the objectives here, lessons learned. I'm a huge fan of lessons learned. How can we learn from something that was not planned or something that was just happened out of the blue, as they say? That's a great teaching tool. So you as the project manager, you want to observe this, you want to manage accordingly, and hopefully get those involved that could help resolve any potential issue. And then you want to, when appropriate, make sure that people are appraised on a job well done or areas of improvement that would be required. I love this concept. And for those of you, team, that may not be aware of what's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this concept is so simple, but yet so powerful. And let me just touch upon it, starting on the bottom. We as humans, we have basic human needs to sustain life, survival, food, water, clothing, shelter, etc., etc. So when you look at the physiological, I like to describe that. I'm hungry. I need food to sustain life. When you climb to the next category, it's now safety. I have to protect my food. I have to protect my, say, my home, etc., etc. So it's the security, it's the safety of harm to minimize and hopefully not have harm from a safety standpoint. Then when you get up to the next category, social belonging, the way I like to describe that is now we're hungry, okay? Togetherness, a group, where together you feel belonged, if you will, as one. When you now go into the next category, I like him, where you have, say, respect of those around you, reputation, okay, respect and recognition, say, for those that you serve or those that you look up to, maybe a mentor. And then the highest of this hierarchy is self-actualization. And what this means is I feel good about myself, that I've done the best that I could humanly possibly do. So I want to share this concept with you as a leader leading a project team and where those team members are in this hierarchy could help you help them. When you look at what's called Hertzberg theory of motivators and hygiene factors, okay, motivators are simply that which encourage employees to work harder, which are found within, say, the actual job. How can that person be better in that role? Conversely, the hygiene factor, it doesn't encourage them per se to work harder, but wants them, let's say, to become better in what they're doing from a motivator. So if you look at the left, if you look at, say, the Hertzberg's, the factor theories, on what you don't want to have happen is poor hygiene or decreased job satisfaction. Conversely, you want to motivate the factors, increase the job satisfaction, things like that. And then that transposes over into the motivator and the hygiene factor, achieving recognition, okay, having responsibility, that self-worth, as I talked about earlier. And it comes down to that salary, that security. I feel good about myself, and I love working with those around me. Hertzberg's theory of motivators and hygiene factors. And one other one, team, I want to share with you is what's called the Mouton Managerial Grid, where you as a manager, it plots XY axis based on concern for people and balancing a concern for achieving results. So depending on what quadrant you are, it could be high or low, say on the x-axis for the concern of results. Conversely, on the y-axis, it's the concern for people. So if you're running a country club, you are very concerned on, say, the people aspect. But, results, if a guy is playing golf or doesn't go to dinner or whatever at the country club, okay, maybe next time. But when you are trying to put together a high performance team, okay, you're concerned not only for the people, but also for the results. So something to think about in this framework of a managerial grid. That then leads, team, into project management leadership styles. And what I have here is a variety of different styles of a leader. So depending on where you are, if you will, as a leader in this managerial grid concept, will dictate you as a leader in terms of the style of leading those around you. Okay? Autocratic, laissez-faire, all the way down maybe to task-oriented or team-based. Especially if you're on a soccer team, that's team-based. Everybody's got to play their role, their position on the field. So here's a group chat question, team. What leadership style in the current role that you are currently doing would you say you have? Now think about the question. You could be a manager. You could be a project leader of some sort, maybe a program manager. Maybe you're a software engineer, a programmer, an IT ops guy. Think about the question. Take a few seconds. In the group chat, how would you describe your leadership style? I'm anxious to see what you have to say, team. Just in one or two of these words, which one would you say is you? Don't be bashful. Anybody? Thank you, RS. Coaching. ON, delegating. Interesting. And TM, more often than not, TM, I hear that. It's hard to pick just one. Based on the situation, I'm sure. I would do team-based. Okay. NV, interestingly enough, democratic. Interesting. LM, discussing. EB, again, democratic. The point here, team, we are all different. We all approach things differently. We have hard skills, soft skills, human skills, but they vary across us. So I just want you to think about, in your current role, who are you in terms of your style of leading? So thank you, team. That means a lot. I appreciate it. All right. Now let's transition in handling project conflicts. Is it going to be a walk in the park throughout the project life cycle? The answer is no. So when you look at types of conflicts in your project, maybe withdraw, retreat, maybe de-emphasizing, neutralizing if needed, maybe compromising, bargaining. I'll give you if you give me, some type of win-win. Or forcing, just like autocratic, I talked in the previous slide. Or last but not least, hitting it head on, handling that conflict directly. So depending on the situation, depending on what the issue is, will depend on how you're going to address a project conflict. Something to think about. So, when you look at types of conflicts, these are just some of many, okay? And some may have a higher intensity than others. You're fighting for resources, priorities, personalities. That's going to happen. Maybe for budget. So in the group chat window, here's another simple question. Which one of these would you say was a recent project conflict that you encountered? Think about that. You have a style. Conflicts are going to take place. What type of conflict did you recently have? And how did you address it with that particular style, given that particular situation? Personality. Okay, RS. Schedule. Interesting. All right. And more often than not, I think the schedule, hey, I want it done yesterday, KT. YS. Priorities. And you know what's interesting there, YS? When you look at stakeholders. Okay, we've talked about that in some of our previous courses, all right, where you talk to 5 stakeholders, they have 10 different priorities. How do you manage that? What style do you use to manage that? CP, technical. Now, that's very interesting. That could circle back to the skills and knowledge level of those on your team. Thank you, team. Again, I'm trying to get you to think on how you could best frame some of these when they're encountered and some options to consider. Thank you. So when you look at roles played by the various team members on your team, there could be destructive roles, okay? An aggressor, a blocker, okay? Someone that's never happy, someone that blames others, or supportive type of roles. The encouragers, the information givers, the harmonizers, things to that nature. The human aspect of those around you that are part of your team. When you look at delegating, you as the project manager, okay, you still have to ultimately be responsible for the end state, the result, the outcome of the project. You have to agree, by the way, in that role, you're held accountable for, the decisions to when and how and to whom to delegate. But practical considerations here, team, to consider. You want to give, you want to gain, you want to grant, okay? You want to expect the best and have confidence in that expectation, but yet you want to require by accepting the good and the not so good as a project leader. So what do you, as a project manager, what should you delegate? Some items could include maybe routine tasks, okay? Tasks requiring a subject matter expert. You don't have to do all of the tasks and activities. You got to rely on those around you that are more knowledgeable in certain areas, okay? And what should you not delegate, okay? Maybe it comes down to something that is personal in nature. Someone is sick. Someone has a problem of some sort that they have to address maybe at home, etc., etc. So these are things that you need to understand, have that human skill, as I touched upon a couple slides ago, as to how to best handle it. So when you look at PM assignment to, say, those on your team, who to give, say, some type of authority, some type of responsibility, maybe the reliability and accountability. For those of you that joined us yesterday, I touched briefly on the RACI model: responsible, accountable, consultative, and informative. As an example, how do you delegate that? To whom? And have confidence when you do that. When you look at practical considerations in delegation, you want to choose the tasks accordingly and assign it to the right people. Make sure it's meaningful, that it is an important item in what we're trying to accomplish. But also, don't be bashful. Don't be afraid to delegate. It really will tell you in turn their persona and the capability and the want or not want in doing that of those that you're delegating to. It's a great lesson learned on those individuals. Something to consider. So when you look at the Project Management Institute, say, knowledge areas, there's 10 knowledge areas. And within those 10 knowledge areas that I touched upon earlier, there are 49 processes. Each process has the same type of template, where your process has a name, certain inputs into the process, tools and techniques that are utilized within that process, and certain outputs from the process. So in this case, what I call planned resource management, okay, you see what some of the inputs are. I touched upon some of them earlier: the project charter, the management plan, etc., etc. Some of the tools and techniques. And the tools and techniques, more often than not, have a lot of commonality across many of those various 49 processes: expert judgment, analysis, data gathering, meetings, things of that nature. And more often than not, the output of a particular process is an update, is the plan, things to that nature. So I just shared this with you conceptually, but specifically for human resource planning. When you look at estimating these resources, here's the inputs, the tools, techniques, and the associated outputs. Again, a nice reference to consider, especially for those of you that are planning and preparing to take the exam in the near future. Direct and manage, like we talked about earlier. Okay, here again is expert judgment, meetings, things to that nature, and then the associated outputs, the change requests. You update the project management plan, things to that nature. And then when you're acquiring resource, this process of acquiring resources has, the physical assignments, the calendar of when they are to be assigned for you, things to that nature. And then last, this is the develop team, the process for HR. Again, when you look here, the interesting tool and technique is those that are collated, those that may be in a virtual, or maybe it's mixed various type of locations. Maybe it's the training in that developing of the skills, or maybe it's the associated tools to do those certain tasks and things required. And then when you look at managing, Okay, managing a team, what that interpersonal building, if you will. And we talked about some of these, I believe it was in yesterday's class, when you look at the forming, the norming, the storming, et cetera, to manage that team throughout that project life cycle. And here, too, the associated updates for this particular process. And then when you look at the control of the resources, the data analysis, the interpersonal skills, the negotiation, all right, and then the performance, things to that nature. So conceptually, these are the processes for HR, one of the 10 knowledge areas that you could utilize as a nice basis, not only for your current role, but also as you plan and prepare in your educational plan to eventually take the exam. So team, let's do the following. This is the first of several fun exercises I want to share with you. And in this exercise centered around HR, here's the question. What was the biggest resource management challenge you encountered in a previous or current project? And oh, by the way, it could be personal or professional.